The morning light filtered through the courthouse windows in thin, hostile rays. Stood in the marble hallway outside Judge Hayes' courtroom, his hand trembling as he held his 3-year-old daughter Emma's tiny fingers. She wore a pink dress that her grandmother had chosen, innocent, precious, completely unaware that her father's entire world was about to either collapse or be rebuilt on this single day. Was a man who had built his life on discipline and order. For the past 12 years, he'd served as a police K-9 handler in the city's Special Operations Unit. His record was spotless. Commendations lined his office wall. He had received the Medal of Valor 3 years ago for apprehending a dangerous fugitive. His partner, a German shepherd named Rex, was one of the most decorated police dogs in the entire state, a testament not only to the dog's training, but to his unwavering commitment to excellence. But none of that mattered anymore. The custody battle had consumed his life like a malicious disease, spreading through every aspect of his existence for the past 18 brutal months. It had started with what seemed like a minor disagreement between him and Jennifer about Emma's weekend schedule. A simple scheduling conflict that any reasonable couple could have resolved over coffee. But Jennifer had been furious about something deeper: his dedication to his work, his late nights, his occasional missed school events. When he missed Emma's preschool graduation because of an emergency K-9 deployment, Jennifer had snapped. "You care more about that dog than you care about our daughter," she'd screamed during one of their final arguments together. The words had cut deeper than any blade. 3 weeks later, received the custody papers. Jennifer's attorney was ruthless and calculated, a bulldog named Gregory who specialized in high-conflict divorce cases, and he had built a case against that was devastatingly effective. Replayed the accusations constantly in his mind, each one feeling like a fresh wound. Jennifer's claims were exaggerated, twisted versions of his life. Yes, he'd occasionally brought Emma to the police station, but the K-9 unit had a secured area, and Emma had played safely in his office while he worked. Yes, Rex lived in their home, but the dog had never shown anything but gentleness toward Emma. He was, in fact, exceptionally protective of her, often positioning himself between Emma and strangers. The most damaging accusation, however, was the one that cut deepest. He's a negligent father who puts his dangerous career above his daughter's. Had presented photographs of Rex in confrontational poses, extracted from police training videos. Out of context, they looked terrifying. He'd found 2 isolated incidents, one where Emma had wandered near his patrol car while he was changing the tire, and another where Rex had barked at her and transformed them into a narrative of systematic parental failure. He'd hired a child psychologist who that children raised around working police dogs could develop anxiety and behavioral problems. Every word had been carefully chosen to paint not as a devoted cop and loving father, but as a man who had allowed his career to override his responsibilities to his vulnerable child. Attorney, a capable but increasingly worried-looking woman named, had done her best. She'd presented counterarguments, brought in character witnesses, showed the judge medical records proving Emma was healthy and thriving. But as each day of testimony passed, his expression had grown more grave. The evidence stacking against felt almost insurmountable. The judge seemed skeptical, had confided during a break 2 days ago. Doing what he does best, creating a convincing narrative. We need something powerful, something undeniable. That something hadn't come. Now, waiting outside the courtroom for the final proceedings, felt the weight of desperation crushing down on his chest. This was the day. The final hearing. Judge Hayes would make her determination about custody and was terrified, genuinely terrified, that he was about to lose his daughter. He knelt down beside Emma, looking into her bright, innocent eyes. She had no idea what was happening. To her, today was just another day where Daddy was acting strangely, where there were too many people in suits, where everything felt heavy even though nobody was saying why. She was eating a granola bar that a court officer had given her, completely oblivious to the fact that her entire future was being decided just 20 feet away. "You remember what I told you, sweetie?" asked, keeping his voice steady despite the chaos erupting inside him. "We're just going to sit quietly in the big room, and you be a good girl, okay?" "Okay, Daddy," Emma said sweetly, reaching up to wipe a crumb from his face with her small hand. The gesture was so innocent, so pure that felt his throat tighten. This was his daughter, this beautiful, perfect child who had never done anything wrong, who depended on him completely. And he was about to be separated from her because of accusations he couldn't adequately defend against. He stood up, holding Emma's hand, and took a deep breath. The courthouse hallway smelled like old wood and furniture polish, the smell of institutions, of power structures, of systems designed to determine winners and losers. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, creating an almost clinical atmosphere. Everything about this place felt antithetical to love, to family, to the messy reality of human relationships. As they walked toward the courtroom doors, saw Jennifer standing across the hallway with her attorney. She looked beautiful as always, perfectly composed, her hair done, her makeup immaculate. She didn't look like a woman racked with guilt over destroying her ex-husband's relationship with his daughter. She looked determined, righteous, certain in her conviction. Their eyes met for a moment. In Jennifer's gaze saw no sympathy, no recognition of the love he had always shown her. There was only cold calculation. This wasn't about Emma's welfare anymore, if it ever had been. This was about punishment. This was about Jennifer's hurt and anger manifesting as a weapon against him. Looked away first, unable to bear it. He squeezed Emma's hand gently and pushed through the courtroom doors. The interior was exactly as he remembered, imposing, formal, designed to intimidate. The gallery was nearly full. News reporters sat in the back. His colleagues from the police department occupied several benches, their presence a show of support that touched him deeply, but also made him acutely aware that his humiliation would be witnessed and documented. Judge Hayes sat behind her bench like a figure from mythology, powerful, unknowable, capable of determining fate with a single word. She looked to be in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back severely and glasses hanging from a beaded chain around her neck. Her expression was completely neutral, which somehow made her seem even more frightening. Her face gave away nothing. No sympathy, no judgment, no hint of which direction her decision was leaning. And Emma took their seats at the defendant's table, squeezed his shoulder wordlessly. Emma swung her legs, which didn't quite reach the floor, and looked around the courtroom with the wondering curiosity of a young child. "All rise," the bailiff announced, and the courtroom came to order. Judge Hayes looked down from her bench at the assembled group. Her eyes swept across Jennifer, then across and Emma. When her gaze lingered on Emma, something flickered in her expression. Was it concern? Curiosity? Couldn't tell. "Let's begin," the judge said simply. And with those two words, his day of reckoning had begun. Everything he loved, everything he'd fought for, everything he was as a father hung in the balance. As Jennifer's attorney stood to present his opening remarks, felt the walls closing in, felt the weight of the system pressing down on him, felt the certainty that his life as he knew it was about to end. He had no idea that in the hours to come, a single moment would change everything. Jennifer walked to the witness stand with the careful grace of a woman who knew she was being observed. She was dressed conservatively in a navy blue suit that made her look both professional and vulnerable, exactly the impression her attorney had likely coached her to project. As she was sworn in, noticed her hands trembling slightly. Whether this was genuine emotion or a carefully orchestrated performance, he couldn't determine. Gregory approached his client with the demeanor of a protective guardian. "Ms., can you describe for the court the nature of your concerns regarding your daughter's safety in officer's custody?" Jennifer took a shaky breath, her eyes glistening. "Of course. It's been heartbreaking. I love Emma more than anything in this world, and watching her be put in dangerous situations has been torture." Felt his jaw clench. Dangerous situations. Their home had been safer than most. Rex was professionally trained, disciplined, and had never shown aggression toward Emma. "Can you provide specific examples?" prompted, his tone perfectly calibrated to sound sympathetic while actually leading the witness exactly where he wanted her to go. "There was an incident," Jennifer began, her voice trembling, "where left Emma alone in his patrol car while he was changing a tire. She was only 2.5 at the time. She could have opened the door, wandered into traffic, anything could have happened. When I confronted him about it, he dismissed my concerns as overreacting. It was a half-truth and wanted to stand up and shout it. He hadn't left Emma alone. He'd been within arm's reach the entire time. His mother-in-law had been sitting in the car with her. But as he watched Jennifer's face, filled with apparent anguish, he realized the jury wouldn't care about the nuances. They only heard the narrative: reckless father endangers child. And there was the dog," Jennifer continued, fresh tears flowing down her cheeks. He's a police dog. He's trained to be aggressive. Would sometimes let Emma play near Rex, and I'd watch my daughter's hands getting near this animal's mouth, and my heart would just—" She paused, collecting herself dramatically. "I was terrified he would snap at her." Nodded gravely. He approached the evidence table and picked up a folder. "Your Honor, I'd like to present Exhibits 14 through 22. These are photographs from the police department's training facility, showing officers K-9 partner Rex in various aggressive training scenarios." Immediately objected. "Your Honor, those photographs are taken completely out of context. They show the dog performing its trained duties, not its behavior around a child." "I'll allow them," Judge Hayes said, her expression unreadable. "The court will consider the context." But had already achieved his goal. As the jurors examined the photographs, images of Rex in full attack mode during training exercises, his teeth bared, his body in aggressive postures, their eyes widened with concern. The judge might instruct them to consider context, but the primal impact of those images had already been made. In the jurors' minds, this was the dog that lived in his home. This was the animal that played near his daughter. "Ms. continued, in your professional opinion as a mother, do you believe your daughter is being raised in a safe environment?" "No," Jennifer said firmly. "I don't. And I do, but he's married to his job. He loves being a police officer more than he loves being a father. Emma deserves better. She deserves to be with someone who puts her safety first, every single moment of every single day." The words landed like hammers, felt each one as a physical blow to his chest. His cross-examination was competent but couldn't overcome the damage. When she asked Jennifer about the patrol car incident and Jennifer admitted that his mother had been present, the admission felt hollow. The narrative had already been established. When asked about instances where Rex had been nothing but gentle with Emma, Jennifer simply shrugged and said, "That doesn't mean it won't happen someday. Dogs can be unpredictable." By the time Jennifer left the stand, several jurors wouldn't make eye contact with. He felt their judgment pressing against him like a physical weight. The next 2 hours featured testimony from Jennifer's expert witnesses. A child psychologist that children raised around working police dogs often experienced heightened anxiety. A veterinary behaviorist presented studies suggesting that police dogs, despite training, retained inherent aggressive instincts. Everything was presented with scientific precision, with academic language that lent credibility to their claims. The testimony painted a portrait of, as a man, so committed to his career, that he'd rationalized away genuine dangers to his own child. Then it was his turn. As he walked to the witness stand, felt the eyes of everyone in the courtroom upon him. Had prepared him extensively, but no preparation could adequately address the visceral fear he felt. He was about to defend himself, and he had no idea if his defense would matter. "Officer," began gently, "can you describe your professional background and your qualifications as a K-9 handler?" Spoke carefully about his 12 years of service, his commendations, his training. He explained how Rex was certified through 3 different law enforcement agencies, how the dog underwent continuous behavioral assessment, how handlers and their K-9 partners were subject to rigorous protocols about home safety. Rex has never shown aggression toward Emma. He's protective of her, yes. He positions himself between her and strangers sometimes. But that's protective behavior, not dangerous behavior. I would never, ever put my daughter in jeopardy. My career is important to me, but my daughter is everything. She's my entire world. His voice cracked on the last sentence, and he watched as some of the jurors softened slightly. Asked about the patrol car incident, and explained that it was a 2-minute situation where he was within immediate reach and his mother was present. "Have you ever left Emma unsupervised in a dangerous situation?" asked. "Never," said firmly, "never once." But when stood for cross-examination, everything changed. "Officer, you work long hours, correct?" "Sometimes, yes. Hours that frequently require you to be away from your daughter." "That's the nature of the job, yes, but—" "And in those instances, isn't your daughter in someone else's care?" "Of course she's in reliable care. But not in yours, not with her father, the person who should be her primary source of stability and security." Each question was a careful trap. Wasn't interested in answers. He was interested in the impression he was creating for the jury. By the time the attorney finished, he'd woven a narrative where professional dedication was presented not as admirable, but as a form of paternal abandonment. "Isn't it true that you've missed numerous school events because of your work?" asked. "A few, yes, but—" "How many is a few? 5, 10, 15? "I don't keep count, but I've been present for the majority of Emma's activities. I read her bedtime stories every night that I'm not working the night shift. Every night you're not working, which means on nights you are working, who puts her to bed?" "Her mother or a babysitter, but that's normal for any working parent." "And how many nights a month do you work shifts that prevent you from being home at bedtime?" Hesitated. He was beginning to see where this was going. "Approximately 8 to 10 nights a month." "So Emma is routinely put to bed by someone other than her father, someone other than her primary caregiver." "That's not unusual." "I'm not asking if it's usual. I'm asking if it's true. And it is true, isn't it? You're frequently absent from your daughter's life due to your professional obligations." By the time finished, he'd successfully reframed honest answers into evidence of his inadequacy as a father. The jurors' expressions had hardened again. His redirect attempt to rehabilitate his testimony felt weak and ineffective. During the lunch recess, sat alone in a small attorney consultation room, unable to eat, unable to think clearly. His mind was spiraling. He'd handled this wrong. He should have been more forceful, more emotional, more something. He should have made them understand that his commitment to his job didn't diminish his commitment to Emma, that these things could coexist. But they didn't believe him. He could see it in their faces. In their minds, he was a man who had chosen his career over his daughter. He was a man who brought dangerous animals into his home. He was a man who couldn't be trusted with his own child's safety. When he returned to the courtroom for the afternoon session, felt broken. He felt like a man watching his own execution. Squeezed his shoulder, but her touch felt like the gesture of someone trying to comfort a condemned man. Then Judge Hayes made an announcement that shifted everything. "I've heard testimony from both sides," the judge said, "and I believe I need additional information before making my determination." Leaned toward, whispering, "What does that mean?" But had no answer. The judge's expression revealed nothing. "Officer will bring his K-9 partner to this courthouse within 1 hour," Judge Hayes commanded. "I want to observe an interaction between this dog and the child in question. This hearing is in recess." The courtroom exploded into chaos. Was already protesting, Jennifer looked confused and felt something ignite in his chest. A fragile, desperate hope that perhaps, just perhaps, there was still a chance. The moment Judge Hayes' words hung in the air, within 1 hour the courtroom descended into controlled chaos. Gregory was already on his feet, his face flushed with anger and panic. This wasn't part of his carefully orchestrated plan. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. This violates established courtroom procedure. A dog being brought into a courthouse is—" "Noted, Counselor," Judge Hayes interrupted, her tone leaving no room for argument. "However, I find that the traditional methods of determining custody aren't providing me with the critical information I need. I want to observe the genuine dynamic between this child and this animal. 1 hour, officer. Don't be late." The judge's gavel came down with finality and felt the world tilt on its axis. This was insane. This was brilliant. This was impossible. This was his only chance. Stood immediately, his legs feeling unsteady beneath him. Grabbed his arm. "Listen to me carefully. You need to go directly to the K9 unit. Officer Cross should still be there. You have exactly 1 hour and every second counts. Don't speed, you don't need any traffic stops. Stay calm. Keep Rex calm. If anything goes wrong, if he seems anxious or aggressive, you tell the judge and we reschedule. Do you understand?" Nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead. 1 hour. 60 minutes to retrieve a 100-pound police dog from the precinct, drive him to a courthouse, and orchestrate what could only be the most important moment of his life. One wrong move and everything would be lost. If Rex showed any signs of aggression, if he was anxious or unpredictable, if anything went remotely wrong, would use it as ultimate proof that was indeed a reckless and dangerous man. The pressure was suffocating. Rushed out of the courtroom, barely acknowledging the sympathetic nods from his police colleagues in the gallery. He burst through the courthouse doors into the harsh midday sunlight and practically sprinted toward his truck. His heart was pounding so violently he thought he might be having a medical emergency. His hands shook as he grabbed his keys. The precinct was 15 minutes away in normal traffic. He had 45 minutes to get there, collect Rex, and return. Theoretically, it was possible. Practically, it felt like an impossibility. Drove with extreme care, fighting every instinct to exceed the speed limit. He kept glancing at the clock on his dashboard, 12:47 p.m. He needed to be back by 1:47 p.m. That left him approximately 32 minutes to get Rex ready and make the return journey. His stomach twisted into knots. When he pulled into the K9 unit parking lot, Officer Daniel Cross was already outside, a look of confusion and concern on his weathered face. Daniel was a veteran handler, 15 years on the force and one of his closest friends. He'd clearly heard what was happening. News moved fast through the police department. Daniel called out, jogging toward him. "What the hell is going on? I heard something about bringing Rex to the courthouse." "Judge wants to see an interaction," said breathlessly, already moving toward the facility. "Between Emma and Rex, I have 1 hour." Daniel's eyes widened. "Jesus, Actually, that's genius if it works. If it doesn't—" "I know," cut him off. "If it doesn't, I'm finished." They rushed into the K9 facility. Rex was in his climate-controlled kennel, resting on his orthopedic bed. The German shepherd's ears perked up immediately when he heard his voice. The bond between a handler and his K9 partner was profound and instantaneous. Rex knew every inflection in his voice, every subtle shift in his demeanor. "Hey boy," said, his voice trembling slightly as he unlocked the kennel. Rex emerged with his characteristic grace, his dark eyes fixed on with absolute devotion. "We've got somewhere important to go." Quickly checked Rex's condition. The dog's coat was clean and glossy. His behavior was calm and focused. This was Rex in his element, an animal trained to the highest professional standards, perfectly disciplined, completely reliable. But would a courtroom environment stress him? Would the unfamiliar setting cause him to act unpredictably? These were the questions eating alive. Daniel helped him get Rex into the transport crate in the truck bed. "For what it's worth," Daniel said, If anyone's dog can handle this, it's Rex. That dog has nerves of steel. He's performed perfectly in hundreds of situations way more stressful than a courtroom. This isn't about stress, said, checking his watch. 12:58 p.m. This is about a judge making the most important decision of my life based on 30 seconds of observation. If anything goes wrong. Nothing's going to go wrong, Daniel said firmly, gripping his shoulder. You're the best handler I know. Rex is the best dog I've ever worked with. Go get your daughter back. Nodded, swallowing hard, and climbed back into the truck. As he pulled out of the precinct, he found himself talking to Rex through the truck's rear window. We've got this, boy. We've done harder things than this. You remember all those deployment scenarios, all those real-world situations. This is just another mission. We're going to go into that courtroom, Emma's going to see you, and you're going to be perfect. You're always perfect. I'm the one who's terrified, but you're going to save us. The drive back felt both eternal and far too short. Traffic seemed conspiratorial, moving slowly at every intersection. Red lights felt personal, like the universe was conspiring against him, but maintained his discipline. No speeding, no panic, just controlled urgency. 13:15 p.m., 32 minutes remaining. As drove, his mind spiraled through catastrophe scenarios. What if Rex had an accident in the truck? What if he was anxious and started barking? What if Emma was frightened by seeing him in the formal courtroom setting? What if Judge Hayes' observation made things worse, not better? But underneath the panic held onto something fundamental. He knew his dog. He knew Emma. He knew the genuine connection between them. There was no coached emotion, no artificial narrative, just pure love and trust. 13:28 p.m., 19 minutes remaining. Could see the courthouse in the distance. He pulled into the parking lot, his hands still shaking as he grabbed Rex's leash. The dog emerged from the truck with his typical calm demeanor, unaware of the significance of this moment. To Rex, this was just another outing with his handler. Took a moment to steady himself, his hand on Rex's head. Okay, boy, this is it. Everything comes down to the next 30 minutes. You're the best dog in the world. Let's go show them what we already know. 13:31 p.m., 16 minutes remaining. Walked Rex into the courthouse, moving quickly but not frantically. The courthouse staff barely looked up as he passed. He'd called ahead and informed security about the judge's order, so his arrival with a police dog didn't cause the alarm it normally would have. Was waiting for him just outside the courtroom doors, her face tense with anxiety. You made it. How is he? Perfect, said, looking down at Rex, who sat perfectly, his posture impeccable, his demeanor calm and professional. He's perfect. Good. Judge Hayes wants to do this in the conference room next to the courtroom. She'll observe through one-way glass with both attorneys and court personnel. You'll be alone in the room with Rex and Emma. Just let them interact naturally. Don't force anything. Let your daughter do what she does naturally with the dog. Nodded, his throat felt tight. 13:38 p.m., only 9 minutes until the observation would begin. The bailiff appeared. Judge Hayes is ready for you. His legs felt leaden as he walked toward the conference room. He could feel every eye in the courthouse on him. This was it. Everything he'd fought for, everything he loved, everything he'd built his life around. It all came down to what happened in the next few minutes. He took a deep breath and stepped through the conference room door. The space was small, impersonal, with a table and chairs. It smelled like old carpet and air conditioning. Just a moment, the bailiff said. We're bringing the child. Knelt beside Rex, his hand on the dog's neck. This is it, boy. Show them what you are. Show them the truth. Seconds later, the door opened and Emma toddled in, confusion on her small face. When she saw Rex, everything changed. Her eyes lit up with pure, uncomplicated joy. And knew in that instant that everything would be okay. Emma toddled into the conference room, her confusion immediately transforming into pure, radiant joy. She squealed, her 3-year-old voice cracking with delight. She had called him for as long as she could speak, unable to pronounce the R, but perfectly capable of loving the dog with every fiber of her small being. Knelt beside Rex, his hand trembling on the dog's muscular neck. Behind the one-way glass, he knew everyone was watching. Judge Hayes, both attorneys, court personnel. But in this moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was the connection between a child and an animal that loved her unconditionally. Rex's ears perked up at the sound of Emma's voice. The German shepherd's tail began to wag, not frantically, but with the controlled, dignified movement of a professionally trained dog. His dark eyes locked onto Emma with the same intensity he brought to police work, but this was a different kind of focus. This was love. This was protection. This was a partnership between a man's greatest work achievement and his greatest personal treasure. "Easy, Rex," whispered, his voice barely audible. "Take your time, boy." Emma approached without hesitation, her small pink shoes crossing the beige carpet of the conference room with the confident stride of a child who had never known fear around this animal. She had grown up with Rex in her life. He was as much a part of her world as her father, her mother, or her grandmother. To Emma, Rex was simply her big friend, her protector, her constant companion. She reached out her tiny hand toward Rex's massive head, held his breath. This was the moment. Everything depended on what happened in the next few seconds. Rex remained perfectly still. His entire body was calm, his posture submissive and welcoming. He didn't lean toward Emma or move to greet her with enthusiasm, behaviors that might have seemed friendly but could have been misinterpreted as aggressive or overeager. Instead, he simply waited, allowing Emma to come to him on her terms. Emma's small fingers made contact with Rex's soft fur, her hand barely spanning the width between his eyes. She began to stroke his face with the gentle, careful touch of a child who understood, on some intuitive level, that this was a being to be treated with respect and tenderness. Her giggle, bright, pure, and completely innocent, echoed through the conference room. "Hi," she whispered, leaning closer to the dog's face. "You came to see me." Behind the glass, there was absolute silence. Judge Hayes had leaned forward slightly, her judicial composure momentarily slipping as she observed the interaction. Eyes were beginning to glisten. Even the court reporter seemed transfixed by the scene unfolding before her. Felt tears beginning to form in his eyes. He wasn't crying because of what was happening. He was crying because he finally understood with crushing clarity exactly what he might lose. This bond between his daughter and this dog was real. It was pure. It was everything that was good about his life, concentrated into this single moment. Emma began to play with Rex in the way that only a child can, a combination of reverence and wonder. She touched his ears, traced the line of his snout, ran her hands along his smooth coat. Rex's tail continued its steady, gentle wag. He licked her face once softly, and Emma giggled with the absolute delight that only a child can experience. "Daddy's dog?" Emma asked, looking back at with her serious, thoughtful expression. "That's right, baby," said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's my dog, and he's your friend, isn't he?" "My best friend," Emma said with complete certainty, turning back to Rex. "My best friend in the whole wide world." The words hit like a physical blow. His best friend. To his daughter, the police dog wasn't a dangerous animal or a risk factor or a symbol of his professional negligence. She was a friend, a protector, a being she loved with the simple, uncomplicated love that only children could offer. Emma and Rex settled into a comfortable silence, a communication without words that seemed to say everything that needed to be said. Emma continued to stroke Rex's head while the dog remained perfectly still, his entire focus on the small human before him. This was a German shepherd that had been trained to apprehend suspects, to protect officers, to perform dangerous work. And yet, in this moment, there was no animal more gentle, more careful, more conscientiously attentive to the needs of another being. Minutes passed, 5, 10, 15. Behind the glass, Judge Hayes hadn't moved. Her expression was one of profound concentration, as though she was witnessing something that transcended the legal proceedings that had brought them all to this moment. This wasn't about custody arguments or testimony or evidence. This was about truth, pure, undeniable truth. Emma suddenly looked directly at Rex, her small face solemn and focused. She had something she needed to communicate, something important that her 3-year-old brain wanted to express. "Good boy," she said, her words clear and intentional, her tone conveying genuine appreciation and love. The words hung in the air like sacred silence. Behind the glass, there was a visible reaction from everyone observing. Judge Hayes' eyes widened slightly. His hand went to her mouth. Even Officer Cross, standing in the far corner of the observation room, visibly reacted to the moment. It wasn't the complexity of Emma's statement that mattered. It wasn't the grammatical correctness or the sophistication of her language. It was what those two words represented: a child's natural, spontaneous assessment of her relationship with an animal, not a trained response, not a coached declaration. Simply a small human being expressing her honest, uncomplicated truth. "Good boy," she repeated, patting Rex's head with affection, her voice full of warmth and genuine feeling. Rex's tail wagged more enthusiastically now, his entire body language expressing contentment and satisfaction. He had received approval from his small human, and that was exactly what he wanted. The same purpose-driven satisfaction he gained from completing his police work, but in a gentler form, in service to someone he loved more than anything. Felt tears streaming down his face. He didn't try to hide them. This moment, this single, crystalline moment of perfect truth was everything. It was his vindication. It was his salvation. It was proof that despite all the accusations, all the testimony, all the carefully constructed narratives designed to paint him as a negligent and dangerous man, he had done something right. He had raised a daughter who understood love. He had built a life around devotion and discipline. He had created an environment safe enough for a child and a police dog to trust each other completely. Emma looked back at her father, her expression peaceful and satisfied. "Good boy, Daddy's dog," she said once more, then turned back to her quiet companionship with Rex. Behind the glass, Judge Hayes slowly removed her glasses and set them on the table before her. She sat back in her chair, her judicial reserve momentarily abandoned. Whatever decision she had been wrestling with, whatever uncertainty had driven her to this unconventional observation, had now been resolved by a 3-year-old girl and a 100-pound German shepherd. Knelt beside his daughter and gently wrapped his arm around her, drawing her close while maintaining Rex's calm demeanor. Emma leaned against him, completely content, completely at peace. This was her world. This was where she belonged. This was the environment in which she felt safe and loved and protected. And no courtroom argument, no expert testimony, no carefully constructed legal narrative could argue against what was evident in this moment. Had built a life filled with love for both his daughter and his work. He hadn't sacrificed one for the other. He had integrated them into a whole that was strong enough to support both. The door to the observation room opened slightly, and the bailiff's voice came through. Judge Hayes would like everyone to return to the courtroom. Looked down at Emma, ready to go back, sweetheart. "Can come?" she asked hopefully. "Yes, baby, is coming with us." As they stood and prepared to leave the conference room, noticed something that he would remember for the rest of his life. Behind the glass partition, Judge Hayes was wiping tears from her own eyes. The judge had seen the truth, and the truth, whatever happened next, was undeniable. The walk back to the courtroom felt surreal. Held Emma's hand while Rex walked beside them, the dog's leash held loosely but securely. They moved through the courthouse hallway like a family returning from an ordinary walk, but knew that nothing about this moment was ordinary. The observation had shifted something fundamental. He could feel it in the air, a change so complete that it was almost palpable. As they approached the courtroom doors, could see through the small windows that everyone had returned to their seats. The gallery was packed. His police colleagues sat rigidly, their faces tense with anticipation. News reporters clutched their notebooks. Jennifer sat at her attorney's table, her perfect composure beginning to crack slightly. Gregory was conferring with his assistant, but even from a distance could see the uncertainty in his body language. Something had shifted in his confidence. The bailiff opened the courtroom doors and guided Emma and Rex inside. The moment they entered, the entire gallery seemed to hold its breath. All eyes tracked them as they moved toward the defendant's table. Was acutely aware of the visual narrative being created. A father with his daughter, a police dog between them, all of them moving with calm assurance. Judge Hayes was already on the bench. Her expression changed from what it had been before the recess. Her judicial mask had returned, but beneath it, something else was visible. A woman who had just witnessed truth so undeniable that it had fundamentally altered her perspective on this case. Took his seat, immediately leaned close to him and whispered, "Something happened in there, something major. I don't know what it was, but the entire dynamic shifted." Nodded slightly, unable to explain the observation since confidentiality protocols prevented him from discussing what happened in the private observation room. But he could feel it, the truth hanging in the air like a force field protecting him. Judge Hayes sat silently for a long moment, her fingers steepled before her, her eyes moving slowly between and Jennifer. The tension in the courtroom was suffocating. Even Emma seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. She sat quietly beside her father, one small hand holding Rex's fur. Gregory stood. "Your Honor, I'd like to make a statement regarding what I observed." "You'll have an opportunity for closing arguments," Judge Hayes interrupted, her voice carrying a tone of authority that silenced any further interjections. "But first, I want to address the court regarding my observation." The entire gallery leaned forward. This was the moment. Judge Hayes removing her glasses, setting them deliberately on her bench, taking a sip of water. The small rituals of a judge preparing to deliver a pronouncement that would change lives. "In my 28 years on the bench," Judge Hayes began, her voice resonating through the courtroom, "I have presided over hundreds of custody cases. I have heard testimony from psychologists, behavioral experts, medical professionals, and concerned parents. I have reviewed thousands of pages of evidence. And yet, I have found that the most compelling evidence in custody proceedings often comes not from expert testimony, but from honest observation of the parties involved." She paused, allowing her words to settle. "Today, I made an unconventional decision to observe a direct interaction between this child, this father, and the animal at the center of this case's controversy. What I witnessed was extraordinarily revealing." Felt his heart pounding so violently, he wondered if everyone in the courtroom could hear it. "I observed a child approaching an animal with complete confidence and trust," Judge Hayes continued. "I observed an animal responding with perfect discipline and gentleness. But more importantly, I observed the authentic dynamic between a father and daughter, a dynamic that cannot be manufactured or coached. I observed a child expressing genuine affection and security." Behind, he could hear Jennifer beginning to cry quietly. Judge Hayes' expression softened slightly, a flash of genuine compassion crossing her face. "I understand that Ms. has concerns. Concerns born, I believe, from love for her daughter and from legitimate anxiety about her child's safety. However, what I observed today suggests that those concerns, while perhaps understandable, are not grounded in the reality of officer's home environment or his parenting." She turned directly toward, and for a moment, her judicial reserve completely disappeared. There was something almost maternal in her expression, the look of a woman who had just witnessed something that had moved her deeply. "I also observed officer during this interaction," Judge Hayes said. "I watched a man with a child he adores, with an animal he has trained with exceptional skill and care. I witnessed no recklessness, no negligence, no indication of a man who has prioritized his career over his child's welfare. Instead, I witnessed a father who has seamlessly integrated his professional life and his personal life in a way that creates security rather than danger for his child. His hand grips arm so tightly it hurt, but he didn't pull away. This was happening. Justice was finally happening. The child's behavior was particularly revealing, Judge Hayes continued, her voice becoming almost reverent. She approached the dog with the comfortable familiarity of a child who has grown up with proper safety protocols and genuine love. She didn't fear the animal. She didn't exhibit anxiety. She displayed affection and trust. Those are not the behaviors of a child in an unsafe environment. Those are the behaviors of a child who has been raised with appropriate boundaries, supervision, and love. Judge Hayes picked up her pen and began making notes, but she kept speaking as she wrote. I want to address the expert testimony we heard this morning regarding police dogs and childhood anxiety. While I appreciate the academic perspective these experts offered, I must note that their testimony was generic and theoretical. It did not account for this specific child, this specific dog, or this specific family dynamic. When faced with a choice between theoretical concerns and observed reality, I find the observed reality far more compelling. She set down her pen and looked up at the courtroom gallery, making eye contact with the jury members, with the observers, with everyone present. This case has hinged on accusations of negligence and danger, Judge Hayes stated. Yet what I observed today was neither negligence nor danger. What I observed was excellence. Professional excellence in a handler's relationship with his K9. Parental excellence in a father's relationship with his child, and the integration of these two aspects of officer's life in a way that demonstrates not weakness or recklessness, but strength and responsibility. Behind the one-way glass that Judge Hayes had ordered installed earlier, observers could see her continuing to study. Officer Cross, watching from the observation room's monitors, felt his throat tighten with emotion. This judge was about to do something extraordinary. Everyone in the courtroom could feel it. I must also comment on the nature of this proceeding, Judge Hayes said, adjusting her position in her chair. This is a custody determination, and such determinations require weighing numerous factors. However, I have found that one factor often transcends all others, the factor of genuine safety and genuine love. I have observed both in abundance today. Jennifer's attorney attempted to stand, but one glance from Judge Hayes silenced him. There is one more thing I observed, Judge Hayes said, her voice taking on a note of quiet emphasis, that I find particularly significant. During the observation, when the child addressed the dog, she expressed affection in the most natural, most honest way a young child can. She offered praise. She offered love. And the dog responded by remaining calm, attentive, and protective. That exchange, that simple, pure exchange between a child and an animal, communicated more truth than weeks of courtroom testimony could possibly convey. She picked up her water glass and took another deliberate sip, seeming to gather her thoughts before proceeding to what everyone knew would be the verdict. I will render my full decision in a few moments, Judge Hayes announced. But I wanted first to establish the foundation of my reasoning. What I observed today has profoundly shaped my understanding of this case, and I believe the court and the gallery deserve to understand the basis of my decision-making. She folded her hands before her, and in that moment there was no uncertainty in her expression. There was only conviction, the conviction of a judge who had seen truth and would not be dissuaded from acting upon it. We will now proceed to closing arguments, Judge Hayes said, after which I will render my custody determination. As stood to present his closing argument, his voice had lost its earlier confidence. The magic narrative he had constructed, the story of a reckless cop and an endangered child, had been dismantled by 30 minutes in a conference room and a 3-year-old girl's 2 words. Sat very still, his hand on Emma's shoulder, his fingers buried in Rex's fur. He knew, with absolute certainty, that his life was about to change. The question was no longer whether he would lose his daughter. The question was how comprehensive his vindication would be. And as he looked at Judge Hayes, he saw something he had not expected to see: respect. The judge looked at him with genuine respect, acknowledging not just his victory, but the integrity that had made this moment possible. Gregory's closing argument fell flat. He went through the motions, referencing the expert testimony and the accusations, but his words had lost their power. The narrative he had so carefully constructed throughout the trial had been fundamentally dismantled in the 30 minutes that and Emma had spent with Rex in the conference room. Even the jury seemed reluctant to make eye contact with him as he spoke. "The evidence is clear," said, attempting to regain momentum. "Officer's profession creates an inherent risk to his daughter. The testimony of child psychologists and behavioral experts demonstrates that children raised in homes with working police dogs experience elevated anxiety and behavioral complications. Ms. concerns are not born of malice. They are born of genuine maternal love and legitimate safety concerns." But as he spoke, could see what the prosecutor was trying to do: create reasonable doubt where a few hours ago there had been none. It was a desperate maneuver by a man watching his case collapse. His closing argument was brief and devastating in its simplicity. "What you witnessed today," she said, standing and gesturing toward an Emma, "speaks louder than any testimony could. This is a father who loves his daughter. This is a child who feels completely safe with her father. And this is a professional, highly trained police dog that demonstrates nothing but gentleness and discipline around this child. The evidence you need to make your decision is sitting right before you. Trust what you have seen with your own eyes." She sat down, and the courtroom fell into profound silence. Judge Hayes took her time. She reviewed her notes. She removed her glasses and cleaned them carefully. She took another sip of water. Everyone waited, the tension so thick it felt suffocating. Finally she spoke. "I will now render my decision in the custody matter of V, concerning the guardianship and primary residence of Emma." The entire courtroom seemed to stop breathing. This case has presented testimony regarding Officer's fitness as a parent, specifically as it relates to his professional occupation as a police K-9 handler. Expert witnesses have regarding potential psychological impacts on a child raised in such an environment. Concerns have been raised about safety protocols and the integration of a working police dog into a family home. Judge Hayes paused, making deliberate eye contact with members of the jury. "I have given considerable weight to this testimony," she continued. "However, I have also given considerable weight to my own direct observation of the parties involved and their interactions, and I must state clearly, my direct observations have superseded and contradicted the theoretical concerns raised by expert testimony." She adjusted her position slightly, her expression serious and authoritative. "The evidence presented against Officer consisted primarily of accusations regarding negligence, poor judgment, and inadequate prioritization of his daughter's safety. However, no concrete evidence of actual harm to the child was presented. No medical evidence. No psychological evaluation of Emma indicating trauma, anxiety, or behavioral problems. No testimony from caregivers suggesting concerns about the child's. What was presented instead was theoretical speculation based on generic studies and professional assumptions." Jennifer's face had gone pale. She gripped her attorney's arm, but was staring at the judge with the look of a man watching his carefully constructed case disintegrate. "In contrast," Judge Hayes said, "what I observed today was a child of remarkable emotional security and confidence. I observed a child who interacts with a police dog with complete trust and natural affection. I observed a child whose behavior suggests she lives in an environment of safety, stability, and love. I observed a father whose dedication to both his professional responsibilities and his parental responsibilities is evident in every interaction I witnessed." She opened a folder before her and began to read from what appeared to be formal prepared remarks. Regarding the photographs presented showing Officer K9 partner in aggressive training scenarios, I find that these photographs, while visually striking, are taken completely out of context and do not represent the dog's behavior in a family environment. Police dogs, like police officers, are trained professionals capable of performing dangerous work while simultaneously maintaining safety protocols in domestic settings. The existence of these training photographs provides no evidence of danger to the child in question. She turned a page in her document. Regarding the testimony of expert witnesses regarding the psychological impact on children raised around police dogs, I acknowledge their academic perspective. However, I find their testimony to be generic and not specific to this particular child, this particular dog, or this particular family dynamic. When faced with a choice between theoretical concerns and observed reality, I find observed reality to be more reliable evidence. This child does not exhibit the anxiety or behavioral problems suggested by expert testimony. Judge Hayes removed her glasses and looked directly at over the top of her bench. Regarding officers' professional commitments, I find that it is not uncommon for working parents, police officers, physicians, military personnel, and countless others to balance significant professional responsibilities with parental duties. Officer's profession does not inherently make him an unfit parent. Rather, the evidence suggests that he has successfully integrated his professional and personal lives in a way that supports both his career excellence and his daughter's. The judge paused, and when she continued, her voice carried profound conviction. I must also address the factor that most influenced my decision today. I observed a direct interaction between Officer, his daughter, and his police dog. This observation revealed truth that testimony could not convey. I witnessed authentic affection between a child and a police dog. I witnessed discipline and gentleness in an animal trained to perform dangerous work. I witnessed a father whose presence brought security and stability to his child. And I witnessed a child express her genuine comfort and safety in this environment. She looked toward the jury box. The child's own words were particularly revealing. When asked to express her assessment of the dog, she spontaneously offered 2 words: "Good boy." These words, spoken with complete innocence and authenticity, communicated something far more valuable than any expert testimony could provide. They communicated the truth about this child's lived experience. This child does not live in fear. This child does not experience anxiety around this animal. This child experiences security, affection, and trust. Felt tears beginning to stream down his face. Emma was looking up at her father with confusion, not yet understanding the magnitude of what was happening. Judge Hayes' voice grew stronger, more resolute. Based on all evidence presented, testimony, documentation, expert opinion, and most importantly, my direct observation of the parties involved, I find that Officer is a fit and capable parent. I find that his professional work as a police K9 handler does not constitute grounds for removal of custody. I find that his daughter demonstrates emotional security, confidence, and evidence of being raised in a safe and loving environment. She paused dramatically. Therefore, custody of Emma is awarded to. Emma will reside primarily with her father. Ms. Jennifer will have generous visitation rights, including every other weekend, alternating holidays, and 2 weeks during summer vacation. The courtroom erupted. Police colleagues stood in a show of solidarity and support. News reporters began frantically taking notes, squeezed his shoulder with fierce joy. But Judge Hayes wasn't finished. "I want to add a statement to be made part of the official record," she continued, her voice commanding enough to silence the commotion. "I am impressed by Officer's professionalism, his dedication to his work, and his commitment to his daughters. I am particularly impressed by the manner in which he has maintained composure and dignity throughout these proceedings despite the serious allegations against him. This court finds that Officer has demonstrated exceptional character, both as a police officer and as a father. She turned directly to, "Officer, I want you to know that this court recognizes not only your vindication in this proceeding, but your achievement in raising a secure and emotionally healthy child while maintaining the highest professional standards in your career. That is a remarkable accomplishment." Stood, tears streaming down his face, and nodded in acknowledgement. He couldn't speak. His throat was too tight, his emotions too overwhelming. Judge Hayes turned to address Jennifer and, "I also want to address the plaintiff's counsel and the applicant in this case. While I understand that concerns regarding a child's safety often stem from genuine parental love, I must caution that such proceedings should be based on concrete evidence, not theoretical speculation or professional bias. This court finds no evidence of neglect or abuse. What this court finds is a loving father and a healthy, thriving child." She picked up her gavel. "This hearing is concluded. The custody order will be entered into the court record and will be enforceable immediately." The gavel came down with finality. And in that moment, life was restored to him. Not just the legal right to his daughter's custody, but something more profound: public recognition that he had done nothing wrong, that his character was sound, that his life choices were valid and good. Emma tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, can we go home now?" "Yes, baby," said, pulling her into his arms. We're going home, and we're never coming back here." Behind him, Officer Cross was openly weeping. His colleagues were applauding. And through it all, Rex sat calmly, having accomplished what no lawyer could have. He had told the truth with his presence, his discipline, and his love. The 2 words Emma had spoken in that conference room, "good boy," had changed everything. By the time left the courthouse parking lot with Emma and Rex, the story was already spreading across social media like wildfire. The court reporter who had been present throughout the trial had captured the essence of what had transpired, and the headline that emerged was almost too perfect to be real. Toddler's 2 words win father custody battle, "good boy," changes everything. Within 2 hours, the story had been picked up by local news stations. Within 4 hours, it had gone regional. By morning, it was being reported nationally on major news networks. Didn't seek out the attention. In fact, he deliberately avoided it for the first 48 hours, instead focusing on being present with Emma, on establishing their new routine, on processing the fact that his life had been fundamentally restored. But the attention found him anyway. News vans began appearing outside his apartment. Reporters called his phone constantly. His email overflowed with interview requests. What surprised him most wasn't the volume of attention, but the nature of it. The public response was overwhelmingly supportive, not of specifically, but of what the case represented. People were hungry for a story about truth prevailing over manipulation. They were hungry for evidence of justice actually working. They were hungry for a moment that felt genuine and authentic in a world that often felt fake and performed. The police department capitalized on the opportunity. The chief of police held a press conference specifically to honor vindication and to acknowledge the professionalism of the K-9 unit. "Officer represents the highest standards of law enforcement," the chief stated. "His commitment to both his professional responsibilities and his family responsibilities is exemplary. This department is proud to support him and his family during this time." That same afternoon, Rex was featured on the front page of the police department's official social media accounts. The photograph showed the German Shepherd sitting calmly beside Emma, the caption reading, "Officer of the Year, Rex, the K-9 who spoke the truth." The post received over 500,000 likes within 24 hours. Finally agreed to an interview with one of the national morning shows. He sat across from a sympathetic host, Emma on his lap, Rex lying calmly at their feet. "Tell us what that moment was like," the host asked, when Emma said those 2 words, "good boy." Paused, considering how to express something so profound in the time constraints of television. "I was terrified," he said honestly. "Everything I had, everything I loved depended on the next few minutes. But when Emma looked at Rex and spoke those words, I realized something important. Her words weren't for the judge or the lawyers or the case. They were just true. She was expressing her genuine experience, and I think that truth resonated because it couldn't be manufactured or coached. It was just a child being authentic. The interview went viral. Within hours, the video had 20 million views. Comments flooded in from people sharing their own custody battle experiences, praising Judge Hayes' wisdom, celebrating the vindication of a man they'd never met. But alongside the celebration came unexpected consequences. Judge Hayes became something of a folk hero. Legal scholars began citing her decision in academic papers about custody determination. Law schools began teaching her ruling as a case study in the importance of judicial observation and intuition, alongside formal evidence. She received invitation after invitation to speak at legal conferences, to discuss her unconventional approach to custody cases. More significantly, the case sparked a broader conversation about custody proceedings in America. Parent advocacy groups began questioning whether expert testimony should carry more weight than observed reality. Legal commentators debated whether judges should have more latitude to make unconventional decisions when they believed the truth of a situation transcended formal evidence. The story also resonated with police communities nationwide. K-9 handlers who had faced similar accusations reached out too, sharing their own stories of struggling to maintain their professional work while raising families. Rex became an ambassador for police dogs everywhere, representing not danger or aggression, but discipline, training, and love. 3 weeks after the verdict, Jennifer called for the first time since the custody hearing concluded. Her voice was hesitant, vulnerable. "Can we talk?" They met at a neutral coffee shop. Jennifer looked different, exhausted, aged, as though the trial had extracted something fundamental from her. They sat in a corner booth, away from other customers, the weight of the past 18 months hanging between them. "I owe you an apology," Jennifer said without preamble. "A real one, not the kind of sorry I might have said if I'd lost for different reasons, but a genuine acknowledgement that I was wrong." Listened, not interrupting. "I was so angry," Jennifer continued, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "When we separated, I was consumed by hurt and betrayal, and I transferred all of that anger onto your work, onto Rex, onto your dedication to your career. I convinced myself that if I could take Emma away from you, that somehow it would make me feel less abandoned, less hurt." She paused, collecting herself. "But watching you through this process, watching how you fought for Emma without ever speaking badly about me, how you maintained your integrity and your professionalism, how you loved our daughter so completely despite everything I said, it broke something open in me. And when I saw that video of Emma saying good boy to Rex, when I heard the judge talk about how secure she is," Jennifer's voice cracked, "I realized I had been so wrong. I realized I had almost destroyed something beautiful because I was trapped in my own pain." Felt his own eyes beginning to glisten. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Jennifer said, "but I want you to know that I'm going to be different. I want to help you with Emma, not punish you. I want to build a real co-parenting relationship instead of using her as a weapon in our divorce." Over the next several weeks, Jennifer worked with a family therapist to develop a healthier co-parenting arrangement. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, still challenges to navigate. But the fundamental shift was real. Instead of fighting for control, they began working for Emma's. Instead of using custody they became partners in raising their daughter. By 2 months after the verdict, Emma had a beautiful routine. She spent weekdays with Rex, her environment stable and consistent. She spent weekends with Jennifer, maintaining the bond with her mother. Both parents attended her school events. Both parents were involved in her life decisions. The family that had been fractured was beginning to heal, not back to what it had been, but into something healthier. A family unit that had survived conflict and emerged more intentional about what mattered. Also found unexpected peace in his professional life. The police department offered him a promotion to K-9 unit supervisor, a position that would allow him to mentor other handlers and ensure that the highest standards of training and responsibility were maintained. It was recognition not just of his vindication, but of his excellence. One evening, sitting in his backyard with Emma playing nearby and Rex relaxing in the grass, reflected on how much had changed in just a few months. The fear that had consumed him during the custody battle felt distant now, like a nightmare he'd survived. Emma ran to him, breathless and excited. "Daddy, Daddy, can I tell you what I learned at school today?" "Of course, baby," said, scooping her up. "Tell me everything." As Emma chattered about her day, about her friends and her teacher and the exciting project they were working on, listened with the focused attention of a man who understood how precious these moments were. He had almost lost the right to hear his daughter's voice, to know the details of her days, to be present for her growth. But he hadn't lost it, and now every moment felt like a gift. Behind him, Rex watched the scene with calm contentment. The dog had become, in many ways, the hero of this story, not because of dramatic action or heroic behavior, but because of something far more powerful: the authentic truth of his presence, his training, his gentleness, and his love. 2 words from a 3-year-old girl, spoken with complete honesty, had changed everything. And in changing everything, they had revealed what was true not just about character, but about the power of authenticity, love, and integrity to transcend all complications and obstacles. Exactly 1 year after Judge Hayes' ruling, stood in his backyard on a warm autumn evening, watching his 4-year-old daughter play with Rex. The transformation that had occurred in 12 months was staggering, not just in Emma's growth and development, but in understanding of what it meant to live authentically, to stand firm in his convictions, and to trust that truth ultimately prevails. Emma had grown noticeably taller. She was now in preschool full-time, where she had become something of a minor celebrity among the other children as the girl with the police dog. Teachers reported that she was confident, articulate, emotionally balanced, and possessed a remarkable ability to explain to other children that Rex wasn't dangerous. He was trained and loved. The backyard had become a sanctuary, had invested in improvements since the custody battle ended: a larger enclosed area where Rex could run and play, a sandbox for Emma, a patio where could sit and simply breathe. This space had become a place where the pain of the past 18 months could finally settle and transform into something more bearable. "Daddy, look," Emma called out, running toward him with her characteristic unbridled enthusiasm. "Is doing tricks." Turned to see Rex performing a perfect sit-stay, the dog's training evident in every muscle. "He sure is, baby. He's the best boy, isn't he?" "The best boy in the whole world," Emma confirmed, running to hug the dog around his neck. Rex tolerated the affection with his characteristic patience, his tail wagging gently. This scene, this ordinary, beautiful moment of a father watching his daughter play with their dog, represented everything had feared losing. The simplicity of it, the normalcy of it, the profound peace it conveyed. A year ago, he hadn't known if he would ever experience this again. That evening, after Emma was asleep, received a call from Judge Hayes. They had maintained periodic contact since the trial, and she had become something of a mentor figure to him, not in an inappropriate way, but rather as someone who had witnessed his struggle and wanted to check in on his progress. "I wanted to let you know," Judge Hayes said, "that your case has been cited in 3 separate custody appeals at the appellate level. Judges are beginning to recognize the validity of what we did in your hearing, the importance of direct observation and authentic truth-telling in these proceedings." Was genuinely moved. "I never expected the case to have such impact beyond my own family." "That's the thing about truth," Judge Hayes said. "When you strip away all the legal maneuvering and the professional narratives and the theoretical concerns, when you allow truth to speak for itself, it resonates far beyond the individuals involved. Your case reminded the legal system that we're not dealing with abstract concepts. We're dealing with real children, real families, real lives. After hanging up, sat on his patio, reflecting on that conversation. A year ago, he would have been terrified of what the appellate courts might do with his case, worried that additional legal proceedings might endanger his custody. Now, he had enough peace in his life, enough security in his relationship with Emma, enough faith in the fundamental rightness of their bond, that the thought of additional legal scrutiny didn't frighten him. His phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Emma loved her time with me this weekend. She's already talking about next time. Thank you for being so gracious about co-parenting. I'm grateful every day that we figured out how to do this right." This message represented another significant transformation. Jennifer had genuinely changed. She had worked through her anger with a therapist, had confronted the ways her own hurt had manifested as destructive behavior, and had committed to building a healthy co-parenting relationship. She now spent meaningful time with Emma, participated actively in her education and development, and had developed a respectful relationship with not romantic, but genuinely caring. More remarkably, Jennifer had recently begun dating someone new. A man named David who was a high school teacher, who treated her with kindness, and who had even suggested that he would like to meet Emma someday. Had surprised himself with how genuinely happy he felt about Jennifer's new relationship. He realized that he no longer felt the sting of their failed marriage. Instead, he felt grateful that they had created Emma together, and had somehow managed to build something functional and healthy from the wreckage of their divorce. 3 days after Judge Hayes' call, the police department held a special ceremony. The annual Officer of the Year awards were being presented, and for the first time in the precinct's history, the award was being given to a K-9 handler for a non-operational achievement. The citation read, "Officer Rex is honored for exceptional professionalism, remarkable discipline, and extraordinary service to this department and this community. But more than that, Officer Rex is recognized for embodying the values that define this department: integrity, responsibility, and the commitment to protect and serve those we love most." There was a photograph accompanying the award, the iconic image from the courtroom, showing Emma with her hand on Rex's head, her innocent smile capturing the authenticity that had changed everything. But what moved most was what came after the official ceremony. 23 K-9 handlers approached him individually to thank him. They shared their own stories, handlers who had struggled to balance their professional work with their family obligations, who had faced skepticism or criticism about their life choices, who had questioned whether they could be both excellent officers and excellent parents. "You showed us that we didn't have to choose," one senior officer said, gripping his shoulder. "You showed us that integration was possible, that we could be devoted to our work and devoted to our families without one diminishing the other." A week later, received an invitation to speak at a national K-9 handlers conference. The organizers wanted him to discuss work-life balance, the integration of professional and personal responsibilities, and how to maintain integrity in both spheres of life. Agreed, and began preparing remarks that weren't just about his own experience, but about what he'd learned from it. One evening, preparing his speech, sat with Emma at the kitchen table. She was drawing a picture of herself and Rex, rendered in the colorful, slightly chaotic style of a 4-year-old. "Daddy," Emma said, looking up from her drawing, "why did everyone care so much about me saying good boy to?" It was a profound question, and took time to answer it carefully. "Because, sweetheart," he said, "sometimes in the world people say things that aren't true. They say things that make other people believe stories that aren't real. But you just said what you really felt. You weren't trying to make anyone believe anything. You just spoke your truth. And that truth was so clear and so honest that it helped everyone see what was really real." Emma considered this seriously. "So I helped you." "You didn't just help me, baby. You helped me and you helped. and you helped a lot of other people understand something important about love and trust and safety." Emma smiled and went back to her drawing. Such a young child, understanding perhaps not the words but the significance of the moment, that she had mattered, that her voice had been heard, that her truth had changed the world around her. That night, as tucked Emma into bed, she looked up at him with her serious, thoughtful expression. It was an expression she used increasingly often, the look of a child beginning to understand complexity, beginning to process not just what happened, but why it mattered. "Daddy," she asked, "remember when I said good boy to in the big room?" "I remember it very clearly, sweetheart." "That saved us, didn't it?" Felt his throat tighten. "Yes, baby, in a lot of ways it did. Because really is a good boy, and you really are a good daddy." Couldn't speak. He simply pulled his daughter close, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair, feeling the warmth of her small body, understanding with crystal clarity how close he had come to losing this. "I love you so much," Emma whispered, already drifting toward sleep. "I love you too, baby, forever and always." As left her room, he paused at the doorway to look back at his sleeping daughter. In the soft glow of her, he could see absolute peace on her face. This was a child who felt safe, a child who was thriving, a child who knew she was loved. He walked to the living room where Rex lay on his bed, the dog's eyes opening as past. "Hey, buddy," said softly, sitting beside the dog and running his hand along Rex's silky coat. "You know what? You changed everything, not with heroics or dramatic action, just by being exactly what you are, loyal, disciplined, and loving." Rex's tail thumped against the floor. Looked around his home, at the photographs on the walls showing Emma and Rex, at the evidence of a life well lived, at the tangible manifestation of love and stability and peace. A year ago, he would have given anything to have this moment. A year ago, he had been terrified he was losing everything. But he'd learned something profound through that darkness. That truth, when spoken with innocence and authenticity, possesses a power that no lie, no manipulation, no carefully constructed narrative can ultimately overcome. That love, demonstrated consistently and genuinely, speaks louder than accusations. That integrity, lived out in both professional excellence and personal devotion, creates a foundation that cannot be shaken. And that sometimes, in a courtroom or in a conference room or in the ordinary moments of life, the most powerful thing that can be said is simply, with complete honesty, "Good boy." The end.